It is the Roundtable on dogpost.com. Quentin, Grant, and Dean Legge joining you today. We're going to talk about the SEC East. Most people would call it the best division in college football. If it were a conference, it would be pretty loaded as well. Quentin, who do you have winning the East?
Well, I'm going to go with Georgia. A lot of people are picking. It's kind of a Georgia-Florida thing at the top, and a lot of people are going Georgia, and some are going Florida. You're seeing it both ways. I'm going to go with Georgia as my pick to win it.
We both have Georgia, as a matter of fact, and it's just one of those things where they're in a situation where they got to go to Jacksonville and they got to go to Baton Rouge back-to-back weeks, but these guys are relatively resilient. They beat Florida relatively good last year, and the last time they played LSU, they beat them by a couple touchdowns.
No, I think they can handle the schedule, and you talk about Florida's their main competition for the East.
Right.
Florida's schedule doesn't really stack up any better than Georgia's.
Yeah,
they run the gauntlet too. So both of them have very, very tough schedules. Now that's Georgia's biggest question mark. It's not returners. It's not can they get it done. It's not are they talented. It's can you handle that schedule that's put in front of you, and who handles it better between Georgia and Florida will be the SEC East champion.
Just real quick on the Georgia schedule, I think at Carolina, at Tempe, which is Arizona State, and then they got Alabama at home. That is probably that will tell them how good they are, and then they got to deal with Tennessee, Vandy, at Baton Rouge, Jacksonville.
Yeah, no. And coming into that South Carolina game, you're going to be getting some guys off suspension, and it'll be can you bring in that continuity? Because South Carolina's usually a close game because it's just how it goes with them. But I think they'll be okay. And then that gauntlet in there that they always have to run, can they do it? And we'll see.
Florida, one of the most talented teams in the country. I don't think there's much doubt about that, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Tim Tebow, the Heisman Trophy winner. The schedule, Hawaii, and then they've got Miami, which is irrelevant to the SEC. I think we'll know quickly whether Miami is any good. I think Florida should win that game. I think most of us would say that. Then at Tennessee, Ole Miss, which gave them trouble last year, at Arkansas, and LSU. Now, some of those are supposed to be wins for Florida. I don't think there's much doubt about that. Some of those are difficult. I think Tennessee and LSU. It's at Knoxville. What do you think? That's usually their. That shows them what's happening in the games.
Well, that's one of the better earlier in the year games. Yeah. It's always a prime time.
But they will have already
game.
Played Miami at that stage.
They will have already played Miami, and I guess the big question is not where Florida show up. It's what Tennessee team will they get that night in Knoxville. Right. Will they get the good Tennessee team, or will they get the bad one? If they get the good one, then maybe they take a loss.
We all picked, except Josh, we all had Tennessee at third. Are we missing something with South Carolina? I think we know how good their defense is. Well, let's talk about Tennessee first.
Yeah, Tennessee's my third pick. I think you can make a case for South Carolina. I'm not going to make it because I don't think it's going to happen. And I think that's why most of us, all of us with the exception of Josh, picked Tennessee as the third place team.
Okay, the Vols have got to deal with Florida at home, then at Auburn, and they got a gimme against Northern Illinois, and then they go to Georgia. And I think we know Georgia's going to be frothing at the mouth to get a shot at them again.
Sure. After the deal with last year and how it went, and it being at home, that's going to be a must-win for Georgia. Georgia's going to need to win that game. Tennessee's schedule sets up a little bit better than especially Georgia and Florida's. Yeah, it sets up better. And then that game at South Carolina will be a big deal too.
They got Alabama at home, which is a big hate-filled game, and then they go to Columbia. And Carolina has lost a lot of tight games to Tennessee, and that's typically sent Carolina to a bowl game that's not as good as Tennessee, or just not to a bowl game at all. Yeah. So that game is a big game. That's late in the year. What do you think?
Well, that could be your game for third place.
Yeah. Could either of those two teams sneak up and win the East? Like Tennessee snuck up and won it this past year.
Only if Georgia and Florida just no. I'm trying to find a way to say they could. No, there's no way.
All right, the Gamecocks. The beginning of the schedule is not that easy. They got North Carolina State at home on a Thursday night. They follow that up the next week with Vandy. We know this defense is stout. They're playing at Vandy, I should say, and then they get to host Georgia. If they're not 2-0, what will their mindset be going into the Georgia game?
Oh,
You know they hate Georgia. We all know that.
They always find a way to ante up for Georgia, it seems like, and play them tight, and even, you know, like last year, get a win. But they usually play a cream puff the week before, and then it seems like all this hype, all their fans, they get jacked, and they find a way to play that game close. It's not going to be the case this year with those two games. We all know what Vanderbilt did to them last year when they were 6th in the country. Vanderbilt went there and just spanked them. And that game with NC State, if you think Tom O'Brien's going to lay down NC State and keep getting beat, you're wrong. He's going to find a way to compete too.
Carolina's lost the last 4 against NC State. They lost to Vandy last year. They upset Georgia, held Georgia no touchdowns last year. I think the other interesting stretch for South Carolina, and this one to me is brutal. They will only be favored in one of these games, I think. They've got LSU at home, which you could see them winning that game, I guess. I mean, I wouldn't stun me, but I mean, it's possible. They got LSU at home. They're off. Then they got UT and Arkansas, both those games in Columbia. Then they got to go to Gainesville. They get a week off, and then they got to play at Clemson. Now, how many of those games are they going to win? How can they? I mean, how are they getting to a bowl with this schedule? The schedule's not that easy.
Well, I'm a show me. They've got to show me. I don't care who their coach is. I think that's been passed. They've had 2 legends in there as their last 2 coaches. Neither one of them have really been able to put the win total up there. Spurrier's going to have to show me. And I think that's why we've all got them ranked as 4th, except for Josh.
All right. Kentucky comes into this season an 8-5 year last year. They played well against Georgia. They played well against a lot of teams. They upset the national champions in 3 overtimes. They laid an egg in Columbia. Did not play well there. They got Louisville, a game, you know, we'll see should they, you know, if they should win, but then they get in October, Quentin. It's at Alabama. They got Carolina at home, Arkansas at home, Florida at State, and then Georgia before Vandy and Tennessee. Boy, they better win early.
Yeah, again, I think most of us, with the exception of you, have Kentucky as last. Well, no, Josh has Kentucky in 5th. I've got them last. Woodson is gone. Yeah. He was such a good quarterback. They found ways to score points last year, and that was what let them have a chance to win games, like you were saying earlier. And if you can't score points, I don't see them scoring points. I just don't see them getting a lot of wins. I think you're going to see the old Kentucky.
The Kentucky defense has gotten better, but boy, it was bad before it got better. So how much better it is, I think, is a good question. Vanderbilt. Now, they're not going to win the East, okay?
No.
Are these guys finally going to get to a bowl game or not?
I hope so.
You're tired of talking about
it. I like Vanderbilt. I like Tommy Johnson. I think he's one of the better coaches in the SEC. He finds a way to compete and do what he can do at a school that is just very, very limited. And I'd love to see them get there. Can they get there? That 6th and 7th win is. You really need 7 now. 6 and 6 just, and it's and you know, you look at that schedule. Where's he going to get 7 wins from? You know, you got to pull off some upsets.
Well, they're going to have to beat a Carolina,
yeah, you're going to
Vandy,
South Carolina, or
somebody,
or Antioch, maybe against an Auburn at home, or something, and find a way. You're going to have to beat an Auburn or Tennessee or Florida at home to get that 7th win, which is just, I mean, that's a hard thing to do.
You got Florida. At the end of the schedule, they've got Florida and Nashville. Then they go to Lexington, they host Tennessee, and then they go to Wake Forest. They got to win at least one of those games to get to a bowl, don't they?
They do, and they can just not slip up against anybody.
They can't lose to Miami of Ohio.
No, they can't lose to Miami of Ohio. They have to beat Rice. You have to win at Mississippi. You have to win at Mississippi State, and those aren't gimmies.
No, they're not. Those are difficult games.
So they've got to win those just to get to 7 wins. So you have to feel bad for Vanderbilt.
We both have Georgia winning this thing. Okay, now if Florida wins it or Georgia wins the conference, can either of those teams win the national championship in your mind?
Yes, I think so. I think you're gonna, whoever wins the conference, I'll be very, very surprised if you don't see one of them play for the national title.
The problem for Florida last year was the defense. Can they repair that thing in no time? Can they run Tim Tebow the way that they did last year and expect him to hold up? I know that's not the plan, but could they do it if they had to?
Well, you're going to see Tim Tebow run. Right. That's what they do. And when they get in a pinch or things aren't going well or it's a close game, Tim Tebow's going to run the ball. Now, what happens if Tim Tebow takes a shoulder injury? That's another deal. And we talked about that last year. Him taking 25, 30 hits a game is just a lot. Maybe he can hold up another year. We'll see. He's probably him or Moreno's one of the 2 best players in the conference.
Is Georgia going to be mentally tough enough to not fall asleep in a game the way they did against Carolina and to a certain degree Tennessee?
Well, they can't. they can't fall asleep. They've got to be able to get through all of those games, because the tough games there's so many of them. There's like 5 of them that are not toss-up games. You could almost say toss-up, but there's 5 of them. If you want a chance to win the national title, 2 losses max, and 2 losses isn't going to give you a guarantee.
And they got to win the conference.
And you got to win the conference.